All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Molinari. I'm going to be showing you a game called OVERPASS. And before I actually show anything other than like actual game content, we're going to start with this 4-minute music video from 2001. Might be a little quiet. Actually filmed going from Paris to somewhere in the south of France. Filmed by Michel Gondry. He's just on the train with a video camera. Just filming this Star Guitar by Chemical Brothers if you want to look this up. This is one of my favorite music videos. Let's just call it my favorite one. Obviously, this track doesn't exist the way that you see it. It's actually a bunch of compositing tricks thrown together where everything syncs to the beat. You saw, like even in the background, just for a few seconds of looking at the, just looking at the horizon in the back. So obviously these notes, the snares are hitting. Let's see, hold on. There's this little bass line that goes. I'm actually going to it. So it's those pipes all the way in the back, the smokestacks. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Every little thing in this syncs up to the music. It's beautiful how it all comes together. And this was one of two very big inspirations for the game. So that That was it. I've watched this so many, like before YouTube existed, you had to wait for MTV to play, and I would stay up just hoping tonight they would play it again. Now you can just watch it whenever. But anyway, that was a great thing. Now another thing was if we go to videos, we go to my Vine folder, rip Vine. I'm sorry everybody to bring that back up. There's a Vine I took in 2014. I think it's this one. This is in New York, going to JFK after a wonderful time at Indiecade East. And does it loop? Not like Vine used to. But anyway, that's just an L train from a taxi window looking out. And actually, if we look at what the game has as a title screen, you'll see that that's almost exactly what's going on here. Almost that same view from the Vine. It's just this is actually the background on the website that just loops. But yeah, so I wanted to make a game where you get to enjoy the feeling of watching something come by on top of you. A lot of us have looked out of a passenger window and heard a song playing and said, "Oh man, that's really cool. That syncs up. I feel like the world that I'm on this road trip with, it's all synchronized. And as soon as this song ends, it's not going to match up. And then of course the second song matches up, and then you're in this weird alternative universe." So anyway, I wanted to make a game where that actually just keeps happening. I realized while I was sitting up there like an hour ago that I could have shown some really cool early prototypes, which is ironic because this game is already so far along. It's still basically a prototype. We're not in full production yet. We've only have a vertical slice that we've put together. But yeah, so I have a bunch of things I've been collecting over the years. I wanted to make this since about 2010 or so. We already saw that Vine. There's a couple others. This is you might recognize. Oh, let's do this one, and let's always use that one. You might recognize this from nearby Zilker Park, right? Anybody recognize this part? I thought it was a really cool structure, this bridge that I'm walking under. All the different shapes and how they change shape as you walk by them. Like something that's a straight line, you walk by and suddenly, you realize it's an arc. Very simple little things like that I was very interested in. And what even is it? These thumbnails are so small. Oh, yes, this is also New York. That same night from the taxi. This is, I don't even know which tunnel this is. But anyway, those little things are all very interesting to me. And so my early prototypes were synchronized not to music but to visuals only. And then as I kept going further and further into them, I realized it'd be really weird if these really cool shapes are going by, and if, of course, I'm going to put music in the game, it'd be weird if that did not match up with it. So I said under my breath, I guess I have to make another rhythm game, which I'm happy to do. I made a previous rhythm game called Sound Dodger. That one was also synchronized visuals to music, but from a very different approach. So I'm just going to go through these kind of reference things just real quick. Some of them have less of a story than others, but this one's really cool just because you can imagine these things going by to the music. We can. This one's just kind of, that's not a real, something's been doctored here. But I think it's a very interesting image. This one, something that's not an overpass, very important. I don't want it just to be roads that are approaching from the distance and then they go above you. Like, let's have things that are not other roads. This is very interesting. This is a real place. I need to find where it is. Google image search will help me. But yeah, lots of weather conditions. They're also very interesting as well. Just like a foggy day, now you don't have as much time to see things come, and then I guess you don't have as much time to appreciate. You need to be able to catch up with it. This one's in Toronto. I actually know the city for this one. I like how destroyed everything is from. Let's just assume that's acid rain that discolored all the concrete over the years. This one's, it speaks for itself. Let's see. Okay, this is from a Kickstarter that was successfully funded earlier this year called The Electric State. I'm very much looking forward to this, and I hope that when the book arrives, I'm not so influenced by it that the game just ends up looking like his illustrations. But this is an alternate 1990s where Wi-Fi doesn't exist, so everything is attached by cables to the whole world, and there's lots of cool images from the book as well, not represented here. But they're a very interesting take on what happened to this very rapid expansion of the world, commercialization as well, which I won't be getting too much into with the game. This is a bridge I saw at night on a drunk Uber ride back to my hotel to TwitchCon, and I saw it, and it was the most gorgeous thing I ever saw, and it was not the alcohol talking. And I didn't know where I was, though. It's this 40-minute trip in the middle of the night. And so I went back into Google Street View in 3D. I should have had my VR goggles for it, but I actually looked for the same structure, and I found it in 3D view on Google. So it's actually the most famous bridge in San Diego, so who knew? But it's called Cabrillo Bridge, and you keep this image in your mind because you'll probably see that exact thing in the game. I really want to have that there. Here's another view of what looks like the same one, but it's a different one, etc. Street of Akihabara, Tokyo. This is obviously not on Earth. This is an illustration. Very interesting shapes, though, how they approach. Almost feels like Thumper at that point. This is not roads at all. but the way that the juxtaposition of the diagonal lines and the flat shapes in the background all push against each other and kind of guide your eye, and you don't know where to look exactly because there's this X shape, and it's almost like a figure eight that guides you back and forth. That's also Tokyo again. This doesn't seem as important, but it'll make way more sense once you see the actual demo being played. Is this shopped, or is that actually a bunch of, I don't know. It's real. I'll find it one day. I'll say it. Now this is here. Okay, it's an overpass, sure, but like the interesting part obviously is the fire and smoke. I don't want to get into too many spoilers of the game itself, but I thought it would be really interesting if we had living things, live things, not just static, dead, inanimate roads. Speaking of dead, inanimate roads, this one's beautiful. And the way it catches the light, the curves, and everything like that, I'm approaching this all from a very visual standpoint, if that wasn't clear already. We can kind of move these a little bit faster here. That one's interesting, too. There's another hand one coming up. Oh, there it is. I'm going to assume this one's doctored as well. Just they make the imagination kind of wander a little bit. A lot of fog, obviously, a lot of high rises. There's a texture that will find its way in. There is the Luxor, not the Las Vegas casino, but this is the original Luxor. And you'll see this exact shape later on in the demo, including these columns as well. More textures, good. Let's see. Good graffiti is very important, the way light shafts come in, especially when you're underground. This is New York, most of these. This one's very interesting. It's not a road. I hope it's not. But it's very interesting in how there's obviously this curve. There's this question mark of what's around the corner. There's very interesting little cavities in the wall and things like that. More light shapes, more shapes, lights. That one's cool. It's not looking up for the first time. It's looking down. Something to keep. That's a very tall bridge, etc. And that's the end. Thank goodness we're past that. Okay, so did I finish all the videos? We did all the vines. Did we rip all? No. There's one more. Okay, this is from my backyard in Austin. That's it. Trust me, it loops very nicely. But that is playing with light and shape and how things move slowly, and now you have this negative space of the sky to work with and things like that. So I'm actually going to do something. Let's just see if it's here. If this thing has an exe, is there one here? And it wouldn't be here. It would have already been already. I have this really cool old demo. I don't want to open up Unity and see if that works. Spline Sandbox, that one doesn't have anything. Oh well, we'll check here. So notice this folder is called OVERPASS 4 because I've made this prototype so many times over the years. I'll organize it later, don't worry. Let's see, no, this isn't the old one. No, we won't worry about it. Okay, so what I have to show obviously is the demo itself. Back eventually works, there it goes. Let's see, what do I have here? I have, that one's done. So what we have here are different concepts that I had an artist put together. His name is Kellen Jett. I know that he's worked on murals for Cards Against Humanity, which doesn't really apply here, and you wonder, where does Cards Against Humanity have art? But he has done full murals where every single inside joke from the game is represented visually in this hellish nightscape. So anyway, he came up with something like this, which is very interesting because the demo, as you'll see, is kind of barren. It's in the desert. And I wanted him to show areas of the game that haven't been visualized yet. So I told him we want to have this kind of futuristic city, not futuristic, so to speak, but like just, a little bit in the future as far as the roads have taken over. There's no more civilization, of course, for reasons I won't get into right now. But I wanted to feel very busy and with buildings so tall that you can't even see the sky for the most part, to really make it feel claustrophobic and crowded, but still busy and alive at the same time. And he kind of went on this path, figuring out different shapes and ways to play with dynamism, which is an artistic term for a diagonal line. But they're very interesting because they catch your eye. Anything that's on a grid is very muted, but as soon as something curves and has a diagonal to it, it's very interesting and pleasing to the eye. So he kind of messed with these things, and we got away from the city, of course, into more natural landscapes, such as this cliffside that has living waves and things like that. And this will all make more sense once we play the game. Don't mind those guys there. There we go. They're replaced with something else. So these are kind of just little aqueducts are back from last. I hope there's another aqueduct in Rusty's talk after this, so all three talks are unified by having aqueducts. This one's very cool, using more natural landscapes. Here's that negative space coming back. Now you're looking at like kind of the space between all the leaves and trees and branches, and the sky itself kind of acts as the thing of interest that goes by. Here's an overhead view, which really looks like Epcot from above, but very interesting to see how all the roads come together and how the trees play into that and things like that. So that's pretty much all the concept stuff there of interest. Let's actually get to the game. And this is, as I said, currently a vertical slice, which means we try to pretend like the game was finished without it actually being made. or really completed. Just to go into who's working on it, it's not just me. There's also a full-time musician known as Makeup and Vanity Set. Hey, we got a fan. And he really doesn't like to be called synthwave, so I'll try not to say it any more than that one time. But he makes very wonderful soundscapes that sound both futuristic and nostalgic at the same time. They're very foreboding, brooding, but uplifting. There's lots of contrast, and every time I've heard his music and I'm driving or I'm a passenger safely looking out the window, I always imagine his music fitting perfectly with this vision of the game. So he is on board doing what's going to be a full album for this game. And on top of that, Power Up Audio, I was going to say Fantastic Arcade. Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Power Up Audio is going to be doing all the sound effects and things, and you'll be hearing some of them in this demo as well. But I want to make sure this controller's connected, otherwise Unity doesn't say it at all. Then we'll just have to exit it all over again. All right, so it should be good now. Don't worry, the mouse will go away. Yeah, so there's that background again. This is kind of it doesn't work. All right. I think this, I'll troubleshoot this. It's early. All I have to do is close it and open it back up again. For some reason, then the controller is red. Presumably. Hey, it works. Okay, cool. So this is, as you saw, we're gonna reset their data. Are you sure? Last chance. Save data cleared. Okay, cool. So, I always saw this vision of the title screen. I was like, this is going to be the attract mode. This is absolutely going to be it. So I made sure that was in just for the vertical slice. It'd be really cool to have it change areas as you keep on progressing in the game. Kind of like if anyone played Half-Life 2, every time you come back to the title screen, it's like where your save file currently is, which is kind of interesting. This is a way to kind of represent where you are currently on this road trip, as far as taking your journey through various spaces. And we can zoom out a bit and kind of get an idea that eventually there will be branching paths and a choice that the driver or player has to make as they go through. But for now, for the purposes of the vertical slice, there's just one level to start with. And this is playable downstairs as well. All the levels should be unlocked by now. And it's going to be very difficult from this point on for me to talk, at least coherently, and play competently at the same time. But just to explain very simply, there's very simple controls. You either hold left or you hold right, and you switch your lanes, or you press A to the beat. You can make it a little bit louder. Thank you. So I'm just pressing A to the beat. And now you start seeing shapes approaching, obviously. You'll notice very quickly that the horizon's not visible, and this is intentional. So you don't ever actually see the ground, you only look up at the sky towards the things of interest. We realized early on, there is nothing of interest on the ground. Sure, you can switch lanes. You can go to the right lane here, and go all the way to the left lane over here. But if you're holding left, you know which lane you're in. If you're holding right, you know which lane you're in. And then eventually things get a little bit more complex. So using these simple controls, we can have a lot of fun with the visuals, and kind of add complexity without making you overwhelmed with at least what you should be pressing. It might be a little bit once it gets chaotic. But again, this is supposed to be an early level that you would experience in the game. You're going to start in this kind of desert, Egyptian-inspired area. First one, beat drops there. We're doing quarter beats, and I can hopefully turn most of my brain off, except for the parts that need to talk coherently and get perfects every time, because I will not settle for anything less than perfect. There's 4 different grade levels: perfect, grade, good, and meh. I mean, you can also get a miss, but those don't count. And there's a motif going on, right? We're looking through a lens, we're gathering information about the world around us. Oh, I just heard a grate there, it's okay. So you might wonder, why is there no traffic? Why is there no reason to worry about what's on the road? What if I collide with another vehicle? I assure you, it's just you and the empty road and a bunch of structures coming for you. And you're people like to describe you as like a Google Maps car that's kind of going and documenting the world. Kind of like that. You're traveling down lost highways, forgotten areas of the past. Civilization has moved on, and you're here to kind of remember what's been lost. And so you're tracking everything, you're looking through the lens up top, the eyeball, so to speak, while everything's synchronized to the beat. So I mentioned before I wanted living things, not just a static road. So conveniently, everything is falling to the beat as well. you know, eventually the Egyptian empire will fall, and here it is right in front of your eyes. You are listening to music from Makeup and Vanity Set. However, this is temp music that he's made from previous albums. Because as I said, we're very early in production, and he has not made tracks for the game. He did make one demo for me. It's a beautiful song. It's kind of a reworking of the menu music you already heard. But this is actually the same music that made me want to approach him. So it's really cool to kind of hear the exact thing that made me want to work with him. And this is also what I showed him when I wanted to ask him, hey, you've never met me before, but I'm making this music game and I absolutely want you to be on board with this game. And he said, you know, sure. Not exactly like that. It was much more enthusiastic, but through text, so always use emojis. These are also much longer than I'd like the final levels to be. This one runs about 4.5 minutes. Fun for getting used to everything, but I do want the songs to be much shorter, closer to 2.5 minutes, kind of DDR style. Guitar Hero is known to go very long depending on the song that you pick, which is interesting as well. There's some of the towers you might have seen in one very briefly shown image in the reference folder. So that's the first level there. I did not get a perfect score, so I'll just hold that to myself. But it did a good job representing what's possible in the game and kind of where we're going. Yeah, I missed the 2 little ticks right there. That's fine. But anyway, that's kind of like a first taste of what goes on. I'm actually going to make this run a little bit better because apparently every time we plug in, we are not on. There we go. If you guys were wondering why it was stuck at 30 FPS. Okay. So this will be a little bit smoother looking. And Power Up Audio was gracious enough to help out with this vertical slicer, so they provided all the sound effects and the stat screen at the end and things like that. All these, like even the sound effect of trying to go right when you can't. That little flick sound, it's very lovely. Anyway, we're going to move on to second level, which is kind of a new mechanic that's being introduced with a very brooding bass line to introduce us to it. So now no longer are you just pressing the button, you're holding it down as well. And here's those Luxor temples and columns that I mentioned to keep in the back of your mind. You'll see them over and over here. If anyone's played Mario Kart 8, the sand level, I forget what it's called, the Egyptian themed one, has these exact same Luxor temples in them, which is very interesting. Except they added a bunch of Nintendo-themed statues in front of them, like a Koopa Troopa wearing a pharaoh's headdress or something like that. I will not be having that in this game because it's not true to what I'd like to be representing for the player. But anyway, once we add these holds, you can switch lanes, and that's now you're holding and switching at the same time. So again, with the same simple 3 inputs, left, right, or your input button A, you're able to add a little bit more complexity to something that's already very simply presented to you. So I've yet to program the holds to be able to curve yet. That's on the wish list, which is why the track always straightens out whenever the holds come. But eventually, you can imagine how interesting it would be if a hold goes around a corner and you can't quite see how it's going to end, and you're kind of curious, listening to the music, anticipating the structured oncoming. Let's see if I get this. Oh, good, I got it. Now, at this part, I like to look out the sides, the corners, to watch this oncoming Luxor temple, and it gets bigger every time a column passes by. That's the kind of stuff that I'm actually interested in for this type of game, just the chances you get to watch things approach. Even thinking back to Star Guitar, the music video we started with, where I left the room briefly, everything is synced up to the beat. Everything you see is important. It's not just kind of there for set decoration. That said, there's not too much set decoration in this game, at least the vertical slice. We want to have a lot more environmental cues of where you are and how you're moving and at what speed and which lane you're in, especially, which is very useful to know. And of course here we can have things like palm trees, and I want to have a level with an oasis where You see it coming, but eventually it kind of disappears as it gets close, so you need to remember where things were as you realize that you're actually just incredibly dehydrated and hallucinating everything as you go through. You also notice there's no moving things here. Everything's very static in this level. I wanted to have one idea in each level kind of shown off. So the last level, of course, is introducing the whole game altogether. But here I didn't want to have too much for someone who's seeing the game for the first time. Obviously, this is a vertical slice. This is what we're showing to publishers and investors to kind of get them on board, to convince them that it is worth their time and money to invest into this thing. I didn't want to overwhelm them too much because there's, as you can see, already a lot of things going on. Oops. Oh no, I missed my chain. If you're wondering how the chains work, if you're into that type of scoring stuff, there's eyelashes above the eyeball, and those show you the last 8 that you got in a row that were either perfect or great, and once you lose them, the eyelashes leave. You get more points if you have more eyelashes, etc. Not very important if you just want to play the game and have fun. Now, I didn't edit these songs down, so they're just really cool winding down moments that you get to play with, seeing the tower in the back with the lights blinking on and off to the beat. Lots of foreboding, mysterious structures coming by, including this repetitive image of this tower that we keep starting the level with and ending the level with. I really love the sound it makes when you do clear it. They did a good job doing that one. All right, so there's one level left here to kind of demonstrate one more idea I wanted to show. And you'll notice that so far we've already been through kind of a midday, and that was kind of a sunset time of day. Now, of course, process of elimination, we're out at night now. And this is very specific why we're at night. Not just because of the interesting colors and how shapes are a little more deceiving when they're far away. You have these shadows. You're not quite sure if that's one structure or two in the background. Perhaps when you get closer, you'll see they do separate, and one is actually much closer than the other one seemed. This level also just jumps right into the quarter beats because presumably you've kind of gotten acclimated to what's requested of you in the previous 2 levels. And also you want to get that sense of traveling. Like, we want this to be a road trip and adventure. You're not just playing an abstract world of Egyptian temples and rock structures. You're actually traveling across the continent, kind of like what the map screen is indicating to you. You are going somewhere. You're traveling through different eras of time that have been lost to civilization, and kind of making your way towards something very interesting. Speaking of something very interesting, I really wanted to do what I'm calling fourth wall interactions, and these are something that's not sitting on the ground with you. It's not something you're driving past. It's something that's happening at the same time that you happen to be observing it. So these shooting stars were kind of the first thought I had for something that'd be very interesting. That's not quite with you, but you know, it's part of the music and it still synchronizes. So now we're mixing and matching shooting stars with the different rock structures as we're going by. And even the shooting stars have a different lane that they're inside of based on their curvature. So if they're on the left, it's the left lane, etc. You can also almost see the Atari symbol right there when all 3 are at the same time. So these levels were all very... Oh wait, watch for the secret one. Right at the bottom, right there. Did you see it? Comes right there at the last beat there. A lot of people miss that, but those who get it, man, the smiles on their faces. Yeah, so these are very difficult levels to script at the moment because I'm hand typing them in a word processing document. Looking at this whole level, it's just a bunch of paragraphs of garbled text that doesn't even resemble code. But eventually, we're going to be putting together an editor that makes it very simple for not only me to make these levels a lot more easily and be able to fine-tune them especially. That's the most important part, because once I have a big block of text, I want to go in and switch this specific thing here or there. It becomes very difficult. We want to make a level editor that actually lets you pick your own music, make your own levels, and share them in a community, so we can kind of almost have an endless highway of user-created lost highways that people get to play through forever and ever, just to keep the game going a little bit longer than how long it would take to, that sneaky one right there, just to keep going through this type of adventure, like the adventure will never end, so to speak. So that's it for the vertical slice there. That's the demonstration of the vision that we've had. But of course, in typical Fantastic Arcade fashion, we're always here for surprises, aren't we? So what I've done for Fantastic Arcade, and unfortunately it's not playable downstairs, but just here today I can show you a level that was the first prototype that became this, Overpass 4, if you remember the folder structure naming convention. And this was kind of all three of these levels kind of put together as an early idea. I just wanted to see what is it like when the structures approach you and they synchronize to the music. So I'll hit my little secret developer button here. And again, we're reintroducing the player, assuming that they've never seen this before, so it's very simple, all-incoming structures. Again, using Makeup and Vanity's music. So this was actually lost to time because I had edited the Unity folder and project so much that this level wasn't playable anymore. And so I went back in the last couple of days and refactored the whole thing to make it playable, and now it actually looks a lot better. It's lit correctly, has the right shadows, and all the little visuals sync up correctly as they would have before. But it's not very interesting to watch this thing that is actually just more or less what you just saw already, but kind of streamlined and a little bit more stale, I guess is the word that we're looking for. So what you'll see on the right are these lamps, like street lights. Those are actually inputs. I'm going to start hitting them now. And those are for score chasers specifically. So right here, it's like on the half beat. So you're doing twice as many inputs, and these are kind of hidden by the tunnels and things like that. So what I'm going to do is kind of make one of my dreams come true and sit in the front row and try and get an absolutely perfect score on this level using all of the lamps as well, which I've never done. So of course it's going to happen live. So I'll try this out right now. Can you turn it up, please? All right, I was very close. I think other than that one section I missed, that was it. Anyway, that was amazing playing in the front row. Let me just say that real quick. I do have this one thing, and they say don't show it until it's ready. But let's just show it anyway. This is actually the editor itself, which is so early, in fact, that it doesn't even work. But anyway, I can show what we have. And this is kind of the idea of when I have when it's actually finished and working. Oh wait, are we not working? Oh, it is working. Okay, so here's kind of the grid of the beats. You have measure 4, measure 5, 3, 4, measure 6, 2, 3, 4, and it all syncs up to the eyeball up top. And so what you do is just kind of press a button and the thing kind of drops. Don't mind the red like mist stuff, that's all broken. But you can also say which lane it's in, of course. You can say if it's really low or really high. You can switch different roads, you can have the different roads. You kind of have things sync up, and it all snaps to the beat, so you don't have to worry about having good timing yourself when you're creating it. And then we can kind of rewind and kind of go back and edit things, and if you don't like what this one looks like, you can kind of switch it over to a road or have it come over here or have it go down or be high or something like that. So it's very visual. Some people like to call it WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And that's going to make it way easier to make these kind of levels, and especially go in and tweak them later on. But yeah, so that's all I really need to show for the editor. And I think if I try and leave, it won't even let me. It's broken already. So anyway, I never programmed a way to leave the editor because I just test it and then close Unity real quick. So anyway, that's it for the demo. I hope you enjoyed that, actually seeing the thing. I'm sorry that once I sat there, I realized that it actually is very choppy looking. It's supposed to be a 60 FPS smooth experience. I don't know what's going on here. But anyway, play it downstairs, hopefully it'll be a little bit more pleasing to the eye. But yeah, again, this is very early. We haven't gone into full production because we're looking for an investor or a publisher to help out to kind of get the team paid what they rightfully deserve. Mostly talking about Makeup and Vanity Set and Power Up Audio and other guys helping me out. So until that happens, we really can't go into full production. So this is all that has existed for the last 10 months or so as we've been shopping it around. But hopefully one day, fingers crossed, everybody in the audience can cross their fingers. Everybody watching at home on Venus Patrol Twitch channel. Certainly one day this thing will come to life and we'll all be able to have fun making music together and driving on an endless highway in our dreams. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. So do we have any questions for our developer? Yes, Randy.
Said you've been working on this since like 2010?
No, I've been dreaming about it since 2010. I started working on it actually, like this version, in January of this year.
How did you feel when Thumper came out?
I was, you always feel bad. Okay, so if you want to talk about me feeling bad about something coming out, there's a game called Twitch Plays Pokemon, if you guys heard of that thing. And this is where Twitch, millions of people, they got a Guinness record, they all play Pokemon at the same time. And then a few weeks before that, I had made a game that did almost exactly that, where the Twitch chat interacted and typed stuff and affected the game in real time. And I was like, hot damn, they stole my thunder. And I actually lost sleep for 2 weeks, and it was a very traumatic experience in my life. But then I realized that they made my elevator pitch incredibly easy. But not to get into that, yes, Thumper came out. I was talking to the devs. I loved the game ever since I saw them demo it at Baby Castles in New York in 2014 or whatever. Actually, where I did that Vine from the taxi. That was that same weekend. Absolutely love the game. I don't feel like they're doing the same thing as me. Now, of course, we're in the same genre, right? And relatively speaking, on a global scale, does that even make sense? Yes, they're like the same game because they're both rhythm games and you're moving in space. But, I mean, theirs has the notes actually portrayed to you beforehand, and they're repeated. They're echoed every time. So you hear snare, snare, bass, and you're like jump, jump, turn, however that works. And they're doing something very different where it is an abstract world, and you do feel like you're going somewhere, but you don't know where you go, where you are, where you've been. It's very 90s demo scene. Is that what Adam Saltzman called it? It's very just a surreal Winamp visualizations kind of blasting past you, and I wanted to have something more concrete that you're actually moving through as you feel like you're going on an adventure and you're traveling from point A to point B. So I don't feel bad at all. I'm actually happy for them. I'm using them as a great kind of like not coattail, not backbone. I don't know what the term is, but like they're a great basis for what I'm actually going for. Like how well did they do? How did they market it? And they worked for 8 years on theirs, actually, which is ridiculous. And it came out as a wonderful product. So yeah, I'm hoping to at least do something really cool on my side as well.
I love the video you showed, the music video. So your game seems to say something about the patterns in the built environment. Do you have anything like super broad concepts relating to how we build spaces and why we build so many patterns and things like that that can become musical?
Well, that's a great question. You see a lot of repeated structures because people need to be able to understand what it is without looking at it. Like, if, for instance, a door should have a handle, so you know that you have to pull it. A building should have windows, so you don't feel like you don't want to live in that apartment because you'll be inside of a concrete block forever. You need to have these echoes of things that are circumstantial, and they happen on purpose and by accident as well, right? Because you start seeing all this stuff going up in Shanghai and Dubai, and there are these most ridiculous buildings that don't look like buildings anymore, almost as if the architects are going against everything they've been taught in school, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to make a building look like it's actually upside down, or it is breathing, or it is actually falling over. If anyone saw the concepts for the final World Trade Tower that's going to be put up, the apartment one, where it's 7 different sections that look like they're going to topple over, and each one represents one of the different boroughs of New York. It's ridiculous. And you look at it, you're like, that doesn't look like a building. It looks like a child played with building blocks and just left them in the middle of New York. It's very interesting how that happens. Now, how is it musical? Did you ask that as well?
Yeah, I just asked the patterns. Music has patterns instead of our building patterns.
Oh, okay. So I totally went off track with that answer. Yeah, there's definitely patterns that you'll see just because of people working off of others' work architecturally. You want to have something that obviously is safe, civil engineering 101, but you want to make sure that it is pleasing to the eye. I mean, that's not always everyone's idea, right? But that just happens by accident. I like to think of even the most simplest of examples. If you're driving on the road as a passenger, safely looking out the window, if you see a tree going by and you just keep focused on that tree as you're going by and keep looking at it as it goes by, it almost looks like the tree is rotating for you. Like you're seeing this side, now you're seeing the middle, you're seeing the back. And the tree wasn't rotating and you weren't rotating, you were just moving kind of in one direction. And even though I guess you can't describe it as something that's rhythmic, I do find it does have a flow to it, almost like rhythm does as things move in and out of your space, your perspective, your point of view, etc.
All right, Damien, you had a question?
Hi.
Hi.
I realized maybe there was this related to the frame rate issue you mentioned, but when you're switching lanes, it seemed like it was snapping very abruptly. Was that something that you had played with in terms of like making the gameplay clear and responsive, versus say like having a little bit more of a transition as you switch between lanes?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of an animation. I would just ballpark it at about 5 to 7 frames or so, moving between like the center lane to a side lane. We did have it slower. I've had it faster. Neither one felt right. What we've been thinking about for that issue very specifically is looking ahead of what notes are coming up and which lane you would probably want to be in, because if you're in the center and you're pretty good at the game, you know that you need to be in the right lane coming up. But there's a lot of time until that right lane comes. It'll actually more gradually animate you because there's no need for you to get there very quickly. Although that might make you feel like it's not responsive anymore, because that's another issue that would come up. You're like, oh, it's usually snapping quickly, but because it's going more gradually. The game itself only cares about what you're physically holding on the controller. So if you're holding the left, even though it hasn't fully animated, it'll still count it just to be nice to you. So that's definitely something we'll be looking at, especially as things get more complex and you need to switch the lanes with very little reaction time available.
Cool. Looks like we got another question over here.
Hello, Michael. You mentioned that you'd done your work so far using, rather than the Unity editor, using some kind of text file. I guess I'm curious, because a lot of game developers need to come up with workflows for creating like the spaces or the levels or whatever in their games. I'm curious if you have any comment on the choice between visual editor and like a parser based editor work, sort of.
Oh, I mean, I'm probably not the best person to ask for best coding practices or anything like that.
More like your experience on it.
My experience. Well, this is how So this is kind of the way I've done it, which is the worst answer you could possibly give. I'm open to change, but I don't know exactly what I should be doing other than what I know works in my head. So this is what I did for about 10 years or so. If anybody knows the website Flash Revolution, it was a Flash-based website where you played DDR bootleg versions of Final Fantasy battle themes. I helped them code the music synchronization, so that if you're on a really bad computer, which everyone had back then, or if the browser is minimized or whatever, the song would still sync up with the beats that were kind of moving into the music. And that little line of code that I came up with is still what I use in Unity to this day. And it's the same way that the script itself is written, where it literally just says, like for Overpass, it'll say a thin type road at this height, at this lane, at this exact time. And I tried to make it readable for me, like it'll say measure 4, beat 2. So it's readable by a human. It doesn't say at 9.683 seconds, this single period. Like, how do you know where that is in the song, relatively speaking? The scripting, as I'm doing it, is just temporary, just to get the thing made really quickly so I could show it to, potential publishers, investors. But the editor, as I showed, was really where I want to be going, and that's a lot of work for the developer, but it makes it so much easier on the front end for a user to kind of come in and just have fun with it. If you're familiar with my other music game, Sound Dodger, the game itself took about 3 weeks to code and then 1 year to make the editor. Mostly because I hadn't made a full-fledged UI-based editor. As you can tell, I like to have very little UI, if any. So having this whole full-fledged thing that shows exactly where you are in the music and what you're shooting at the player and things like that, I wanted to make sure it was very easy to do. And maybe I only hear the good side of things, but people have mostly said that editor is very intuitive, easy to use, and they can very quickly edit and throw together kind of an impromptu level that they can go in and tweak later on. So I want to make it even faster, where, as you saw, you just let the song play and press your inputs, and you're almost basically done making the level. As long as you're, enough of familiarity with the level editor, you can go in and kind of just make the whole level in one shot. So usually it would take like 1 hour per minute in Sound Dodger to make a 4-minute song would take you 4 hours or so of tweaking. Here I wanted a 4-minute song to take 4 minutes to make the whole level. So that's kind of my end goal for how easy I want it to be for people to make stuff.
I think we have one other question up here in the front.
Hi, Michael. Had you considered also doing an automatic editor input, something like Audio Shield does, with bringing in the audio, automatically laying out the beat, and automatically laying out a few changes, and then using that as a basis for the editor?
Are you talking about procedural level generation or something less than that?
Yeah, and just bring in your own music or YouTube video and use that to generate the initial layout of the sound and then modify from there.
So I strongly feel that all procedural generated music-based games are not as good as they possibly could be.
Tend to agree.
That includes Audio Surf, Audio Shield, Beat Hazard, all of the greats. Like they're fantastic for what they do, right? But all of them ride the exact same note, right? And Audio Surf tries to recognize if there's vocals and if it's orchestra playing, or if it's something if it's hip hop versus something that's pop, and it tries to find those beats and kind of generate something different. But it's going to be the same pop level every single time, There's something missing, and that's the human element, which is something that we put into Sound Dodger as a joke. We have auto-gen mode, which is like the meme that goes around, where it's absolute garbage. And I tried to make it as good as I could. It is absolute hot garbage. It's not fun to play. It's not even like bad good, like The Room or something like that. It's just not good. My thinking is that eventually, once they get deep learning and machines before they take over, but after they're much better than they are now, that's like the sweet spot where they'll be able to see, oh, this is a human voice, and oh, that voice is actually crying out for help, and oh, let's have this very uplifting moment through the gameplay that'll make the player feel like they're helping them out as they're singing, and there's this drop of the beat, and let's actually have it be an interesting drop and not just more notes coming at you and things like that. So until that happens and someone can hook that up, it probably won't be me for this game. Procedural generation is probably not the way to go to get people to really care about the level. On top of that, you could think of like Mario Maker, where every single level was made by a human, as far as we know. And so even the absolute garbage levels, you're like, what was even the point of playing this? You're like, wow, some kid or adult went through and placed one block on a floor and uploaded it to the server, and that was it. And that becomes interesting. The human element's there, whereas if you saw a computer just put one block on a blank level, you're like, all right, why? This was not worth my time at all. So it's very interesting how that little change changes your perspective.
Thanks.
All right, let's thank Michael again for showing us Overpass.